Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's guest is Michela Laverty, who is a seasoned special education consultant and the founder of Only Able Special Education Consulting, which is based in Denver, Colorado. She has a background in implementing inclusive practices and building successful programs for students with learning and intellectual disabilities. And she is passionate about supporting educators through professional development, coaching, and advocating for high-quality resources in special education. She's here today to share her insights on how she was able to write and develop IEPs without giving up too much of herself along the way, which I know is a challenge. So, Michela, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you and where Ole Able came about.
Yeah, so I've taught for a total of 10 years in special education or in the education world. I'm originally from New Mexico, and I got my degree at the University of New Mexico. I'm a dual licensed teacher, and I fell into a life skills program at the high school I graduated from back in Washington State. So that was my first big girl job, and I had a lot of questions because my student teaching was in third grade gen ed, and my actual job was high school self-contained. So I came in hot with lots of questions, and no one had any real answers for me, which was very interesting. I would ask, okay, what standards are we teaching to? How I was told this is a life skills program. So I'm asking, what am I going to do with these kids for 6 periods a day? I'm going to have these kids for 4, 5, 6 years. How do I know how to design their instructions so they're not learning the same thing all over? And it was very interesting. I kind of had to rebrand and restructure everything. So we scrapped everything, and I was learning a lot on my own and wherever I could find some information. We were able to get this functional academics program. It was called the Steyer Fitzgerald Program for Functional Academics. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I don't know that.
It's a curriculum, and I was able to get that early in my first year of teaching, and finally I had something to sink my teeth into. So it gave me standards they were lessons, but I saw those as my standards. It gave me IEP goals. It gave me ideas. If my kids were able to count money, where was I going to take them to with their money handling skills? So it really finally gave me something to sink my teeth into, but I had to figure everything else on my own.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting world. My kids were self-contained and didn't get to go into gen ed, and I had to change that. But you can't just say, hey, my kid's going to be in your class. It doesn't really work that way when they've never been able to be in inclusion classrooms. So I really had to go and change everything from the beginning. And I got tired of having to search for everything and find and piece together my own programs. How do I write these IEPs? How do I make IEP writing easier? How do I do inclusion? How do I teach these kids skills with big behaviors? So I've taken some time out of the classroom just to take a pause. I moved to Denver, Colorado. I wasn't just ready to jump into any classroom, and I wanted to create resources for teachers so that we could be a part of the solution. If it's a long-winded
No, totally makes sense, because it's similar to my story, because I know so my undergrad was in early childhood and I taught general education. And then I got my certification in special education and did my master's in special education. I remember my first year, going into a classroom of my kids were fully self-contained, but were very intellectually impaired. And I remember getting IEPs, and, even with all of my degrees and everything, you're not taught how to write an IEP. You're not taught how to do curriculum, right?
And I don't teach how to write it. Mm-mm.
Exactly. And it's so I got these IEPs that were the IEPs that everybody else had done. And I'm working on the goals in that sense. But yeah, there was nothing. I remember at one point I wrote a grant and I got the grant for a touch screen for the computer, because like when I
Mhm.
taught way back when, and then I developed a computer program myself for the kids of,
Really?
yeah, I know, and I never monopolized on it. I totally should have, but it was basic, because it was like recognizing colors and recognizing shapes and those type of things. But the things that were out there and available were so overwhelming and too much, because like you're picking out a circle of this big design thing instead of like three little pictures. And yeah, it was hard because it was just kind of, what is everybody else doing? And not everybody was doing to the standards that I would like it to be done to.
Yes,
You know,
ain't that the truth?
yeah.
That really hits hard. I was always looking for resources that supported my philosophy of special education. And I didn't realize until it was a couple years in that I was so different than a lot of educators that had been in it before. And my perspective was different because my outlook was different. My
Right.
college programs were different. I understand that. But I wanted to find age appropriate materials. I wanted to find materials that were tech savvy. I wanted to be able to make things easier, and I had to figure it out on my own because there wasn't a lot of stuff back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. And I remember with mine, I mean, I was teaching back in the day of, it was still sort of like back in the, we were out in the back rooms,
Mhm.
and not integrated within, and not with, and I used to take my kids out and about, like, and I had one child that he used to sit like this all the time. And, after a couple of months, I had him going into the main office going, hi to everyone, and just,
Mhm.
having those interactions and being, in the school and part of the community, which it was so different. And I loved it because my kids, like, I felt like I was making a difference for them, giving them experience that they never, might not have gotten before. Um,
Mhm.
and, but like, yeah, finding the curriculum and what do you teach? Because, what is appropriate to teach these children? We don't want to, like, I know so many times people are like, oh, we need to add them to, teach them to recognize circles and squares. I'm like, well, is that really what's important? Like,
Yeah. That's a
right?
huge that's everything I talk about every day, because if they're 17 years old, we probably should be working on social communication skills, how to do at least a two-step, job task. How do I navigate the world as a 17-year-old with facial hair, you know?
Right. Right. How do I
Yes.
recognize a stop sign maybe and a yield sign, and what do these mean? Like
Mhm.
the actual life skill things that, and I know around here now, I don't know if they do it out in Denver, but like everything has to relate back to a general education core area. And I'm like, okay, like I get it, but if you have a
Mhm.
10th grader functioning at a second grade level, this doesn't quite work.
It
Right.
just cracks me up when people make rules or expectations for everybody, but they've never gone into my classroom. They've never met
Yep.
my kids. I
Yeah.
would ask them, I would ask all kinds of questions. We finally had a SPED consultant come into my building one year, and I asked them all these questions, and I realized pretty quickly they work with the neurodivergent, the kids with easy disabilities, but they have not a clue how to work with my kids.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, if you can do this, get me in there, because we should have higher expectations and have a better understanding of what is going on in our schools.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And that I have that argument all the time, and discussions of like the lawmakers and the people, um, Board of Ed, and even, the states level and stuff, that yes, they're great and they serve a purpose, but they need to, like, boots on the ground, come in, see what it is. I remember when I was special ed coordinator, and I had just taken over the job at an alternative middle and high school. I'd taken over the job a month before, and the paperwork was a hot mess. This was in Florida, and we were getting audited by the state of Florida, and they came in. And I of course worked weekends and got it all cleaned up. And when she came in, we wound up going into a lockdown, and she freaked out.
Yeah.
She was like total freak out, like, what's going on? Like, she's like, oh my God, you have to escort me. I have to get out of here. Like, she wound up leaving. And it
That's
was
not
just,
how
and
it
I
works.
get it, because, like, for me, it was like, whatever, we're in a lockdown, no big deal. But I get it. But like, if you are a person that's responsible for overseeing all this, you should be understanding and knowing what we're doing, right? And
Mhm.
what the kids need, because you know what, every kid needs something different. Like the kids in the inner city and the kids in the intellectual levels, and kids in Denver versus kids in DC, like,
Exactly. Context matters so much. And if you have the power over a group of people, and I don't care if it's in business or if it's in some sort of political world, public education, if you have some sort of power and you're making rules and expectations for people, you better be boots on the ground and show up and figure out how that's going to be done efficiently and where it's conducive to every element of our job.
Right.
That's why when I jumped in and started my consulting firm, Only Able, I thought, how am I going to make sure I'm not just another one of those companies that I've been making fun of for 10 years? Because I have been judgy and I am judgy. So anyone who works right now, it's just me. But as I grow and have other people, anybody from the bookkeeper to a trainer who works with Only Able is going to be subbing in schools. Because even just being a year out of the classroom, it's really freaked me out. And I don't ever want to be that person who was lost and disconnected from the kids and the job itself, because every year it changes and evolves. So that's a key requirement, and it's a core value of mine.
That's awesome. And it's so true. It's I see it also, like, I'm not in the classroom anymore, obviously. It's been quite a few years, but like, I have kids on IEPs, so I see it. I go in and observe. I'm at least on that level.
You're in there, yeah.
And seeing, and seeing what's going on and talking with my clients, but in hearing my clients, and hearing the parents and the teachers for that matter, because even at IEP meetings with the teachers, like, I can see they're overwhelmed, and I sit in IEP meetings and I'm like, I get it. Like, I 100% get it. I used to do it. I understand. You weren't trained. This is, let's work together to get this developed the right way. Sometimes teachers are open to, who is this lawyer coming in telling me how to do my job? Sometimes they're not as much, and then I, of course, tell them, like, look, I have the background. It's not just some lawyer. But like, what have you found, like, with like, developing these environments, and like, how do you help the teachers make it more collaborative and working with the other professionals and the families?
It all comes down to creating systems for success. No one taught me how to do this IEP thing. And for me especially, I have ADHD. So if I don't understand how this whole big paperwork load is going to make sense within the context of having behaviors and absence staff members and all these moving parts, how am I going to follow this process? So I messed up enough my first couple years, and I figured out I can't just write this draft in IEP online and do it all quickly and do it the week it's due, because that's not my best work. And then I'm a hot mess. Right. So every time I come across a hurdle, it feels like an obstacle, but I process it before and after. I think, how can this be less of a hurdle? How can I make this doable? So I have some systems in place that enhance communication, that make sure it's not just a task I have to check a box off in, but we're having meaningful communication. So before school starts, I get my caseload of kids. I look through their documents. I like to annotate, so I might take some notes and ask some questions. And I send an email out to all the team members. So I have an email I send out to my school leaders, SLP, OT, my admin, and I say, hey, if you have questions, these are the kids we're working with together. This is the best way to get a hold of me. If you want me in person, whatever, these are the times you meet with me, and I'm available. And I really believe in collaboration. So please don't hesitate to come and chat with me. And I send that email. And a lot of times people will think, well, I already emailed that person, they should just know. But that's not how the world actually works. So I send the email so it's in their inbox, and then I go visit them in person, pop in. I'm intentional not to take up too much of their time, because no one wants to be that person. And on my end, I feel like that can sometimes be a red flag. So I go pop in, reiterate what I wrote in that email, and just let all the team members know who I am as a case manager and what I'm looking for them and whatever they're needing on their end. I get so much more out of my staff member or my team in general when they realize I value them, their time, and their knowledge. So that's step one. And then I have the same system for communicating with families. By the time they get to be in high school, a lot of families actually don't. They're checked out. They're not as invested in the IEP process. A lot of them don't fully understand the IEP process. They don't understand what this means and why it's important to be engaged. So I kick off that communication in the very same way, where I'm going and hitting them in any area I can, so that they can realize that I'm that teacher that they can come and connect with.
Right.
So I talk to their 8th grade teacher if they're coming to me in high school, and I drop off a little newsletter to go home in their backpack before they go to high school or before they go off to the summer. I send an email. My parents can reach out to me on Remind. So they have different methods of getting a hold of me. And then I call them again. I call them, and we don't want to do that anymore.
No.
But I do it because I like people. And I also am not afraid to call parents in the middle of the school year. So I have them all on speed dial. My kids know it. Their mamas are on speed dial. But I call them and introduce myself before school starts. So hitting that communication piece so that we can have an actual team is really huge. That's step one. I could probably talk about IEP processes forever, but another thing that I do is I have templates online so I can start getting my ideas out, writing a structure. I have a structure for how I write my present levels, a structure for how I write certain things. And I have that template based on different skill levels. So then I can kind of start writing the guts of it all instead of having to scramble last minute.
Right.
So every kid has a Google Doc. It's saved in my Google Drive, and I can work on those things when I do have the bandwidth, when I do have the time. So that when I have 4 IEPs due in March, when we have state testing and absences and sickness and COVID, it's not going to hit me the same way that it would before.
Right. Because you have it, you actually do the way we're supposed to do things, and the collecting of the data and all of the other information. I love that you have the templates, because that's, people send out these draft IEPs and they're so different, even within like one county. I mean, I work, internationally, but like even within the state, with the county, how they're written, like the present levels or the goal, and it just, they're so disconnected. I could see how creating a template of making it of here's the present levels. So then here's are the supplementary aids we need, and here are the goals, and putting it together the way it makes sense, and then plugging it into the system that doesn't make sense in how the order is, right? Like present levels are here and goals are down there.
Well, and when I started, and it makes sense now. I don't know why I didn't just do this in the beginning, but I'm the person that you have to explain to me what I need to be doing. Otherwise, I'm just going to be winging it. So I just wrote every kid's IEP from scratch with just kind of going for it. And I didn't realize a lot of those things, I was saying the same thing. I was formatting it in the same way. And I thought there's got to be a better way where I can make sure I'm not forgetting something if this kid's IEP is due the week that things are crazy. Right. So in order, it's kind of my guardrails. These are my bumper rails. What do they call it in bowling? You know what I'm talking about.
The bumpers. I think they're just bumpers.
Okay. My bumpers, to make sure that something didn't fall through the cracks, because my world was so crazy. I couldn't guarantee that I was going to be as good of a teacher, necessarily good of an IEP writer in March as I am in September,
And it makes sense for everything. I mean, like running a small business, running a law firm, running everything. It's like, it's all about systems and processes, like having it in place and having that checklist and knowing how to do it, because it's, as my coach always explained it, it's like, let's use our brain power on the stuff we need to use our brain power on. Remembering everything that needs to go in the IEP, we shouldn't have to use brain power. We have that form. So I'm so interested in these templates. So do you, like, in your company has these templates? Do you sell them to teachers, or what does that look like?
Well, that's a great idea. I should. I haven't. I offer them when I'm working with schools. Right now, I have a template that's tailored with the functional academics program. I do training for that curriculum. And so I share my template system with those teachers. And I have a lot of resources. So I'm going to be giving a lot of freebies out. And I'm working on developing a self-contained boot camp. So teachers can join this and learn throughout the year. Okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? So they'll be getting those resources within the boot camp process. I have a hard time. The templates are really tailored to the context of the situation. So it's really hard to just write one go for all template that's going to fit your classroom with the curriculum you're using. But if I know the program you're using, if I know what resources you have, then I can take that and figure out how I would structure it. For example, in the functional academics program, we do a present levels assessment, and it's broken into all these different levels. So if my kid is placing at the 5W, the highest level, they're working on reading the who, what, where, where, when, or why aspects of a text, I'm still going to write the levels that came before that and their scores, so that whoever, if this kid transfers to another district, the teacher's going to say, oh, this kid has got a lot to work with, and now I better understand them than just the one thing they're working on now. My biggest pet peeve is when I get a present level set and I have not a clue what it means.
Yep. Always, right?
This is good for your brain, but it doesn't make sense to my brain because I don't have your stuff.
Right.
And
Or they like, I see them that they just give like the Woodcock Johnson scores. Like, how is this helpful? Like, right. I had somebody on the show, and I don't remember which week it was, but recently I had somebody on the show about talking about how present levels, how reading the present levels, you should understand this child and how this child functions in that area. In reading, you know, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What works? What doesn't work? Because the whole idea is this present levels of how the child functions is what drives the rest of the IEP. And people don't understand that.
Well, and I really want this IEP process in general. I want my parents to get an IEP and understand what they're reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want the parents to be able to take it later when they're working with services or getting support from outside places and have something they can give where they understand what they're reading.
Right.
Because I'm spending a lot of time on this thing. It better be useful, right, and not just doing it to check a box off my list, right?
Right.
And I really want it to be tailored. So I'm pretty intentional, and I should probably wrap my head around how I can make something. I'm not great at this business stuff because I just want to help teachers. So I'm learning, but how I can wrap my head around something that's a little more useful for different places. I used IEP Online, but every platform is different. So my templates are written for IEP Online. I'm working with a school district down here that uses Enrich now, or Frontline. And so I am going to learn that, make a template for that. So eventually I think I'll have a built out little library of resources for that as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I mean, templates are big, and I'm sure anybody watching the shows, because I know I have teachers that watch the show also, are like, oh wait, where can I get that template? And I was thinking along the lines of more of a general template with all the information that needs to be there, not tailored towards.
Yeah.
But so that might be something, you know, thinking about. But it makes sense because teachers aren't taught how to write IEPs.
No.
Like, it's amazing. Even like special education, you know, I went back, I got certified, I got my master's. Never did you taught about IEPs.
And then every district is so different for what they're expecting. I went and was training a school in Texas, and I showed them my template, and they said, oh my God, that's really cool, but we can't use that. I said, why not? Because anything they write in their present levels that gives a glimmer of a chance a kid can't do something, it has to be a goal. So someone can fact check me, but it turns out some of these kids have 14 goals.
Wow.
18 goals, 21 goals. And I thought, what?
How?
So I don't know. If I could figure out to block off 6 months of my time to go talk to all these people and make these choices, let me in. I'm coming. And I'm so passionate about that. That's something I would love to get into. But I'm like, it really has to be tailored and what every district is expecting you to do. So you're going to have to take the template I made, and you're going to have to look at whatever the district's telling you to do. And you're going to have to figure out how to make that language work for you. But at least the templates that I have will give you a better idea.
Yeah. And that does make sense. I can understand that if you say anything that it's something a child can't do, but it doesn't always have to be like the way I look at it, though, and the way we do it more around here is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a goal. It can be a supplementary aid. It's like, but how is it addressed? So like this child has a hard time remembering schedules. Well, okay, that doesn't need to be a goal. It could be a visual aid of having a schedule, and that's a supplementary aid. You know, it just, so I can see that. And it makes sense, though, because if to the extent of if there's a weakness, how is the weakness being addressed? Right? Not necessarily there needs to be a goal for all of it, but how is the IEP addressing it?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a roadmap for how we're going to support these kids in all these areas. When I was trained-ish, right, by other educators, I wanted to make sure that the present levels had a better full picture of this kid, so anyone else could take it and understand that this whole context comes into play when I'm designing instruction. However, if I'm going in with the intention that everything I'm writing this kid struggles with is going to has to be documented and really written out how we're going to handle it, then I can't do my actual job. Now my job becomes paperwork and litigation. It just really gets in the way of my job as a teacher. And that I have a difficult time with. I think I want the team member to have a better picture and understanding of this student. And what I can do within the time that I have them from 7:30 to 2 is these are the things that we're tackling here. But through this is all, as a big picture, he's more than just these 4 goals we're working on.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, it totally does, because it's you want the full picture of the child, and you don't want to be writing in fear of litigation or somebody coming back and looking at stuff. And that's where the higher ups that are making these decisions don't have the boots on the ground to see the reality.
And too often that's the root of how we're writing documents. It's because we're scared of A, B, and C, and we don't want this to turn into something else. So we're going to pretend like this doesn't exist.
Yeah. And it doesn't help our kids at all. And I can see it, like, weakness and struggles. And I guess, I'm thinking along the lines of how you could write it that, we're addressing these skills first. And once these are mastered, then we'll work on goals towards those skills or something like that. But yeah, that 14 goals, I couldn't imagine. We freak out here with 6, thinking that's like too many.
Yeah, 6 feels, I'll have some kids that have 6 because of behavior or whatever else we have going on. 4 is my average. But if I had over 6, I've have a lot of questions. Like, why does this need to be a goal? Why are we tracking data on this regularly? Because if you have 14 goals, that you're telling me that I need to be progress monitoring on 14 goals weekly. How?
Right. Like, when are you going to teach? And what about the 6 other kids?
Well, exactly. How is this supposed to work within the time that I have them and all the other things we have going on at school? It's already hard enough to get these things taken care of. So you come in and show me. That's what I would say. Come show me how to make my schedule and model it for me.
Right.
And 9 out of 10 times they can't. They don't have an answer.
Yeah. And that comes down to when I was doing pro bono work when I was in law school with a special ed attorney. What he usually does is, like, you finish writing the IEP, and then at the end you look at the teacher and say, can you implement this the way it's written? And the teacher's like, kind of, because a teacher cannot say that they can implement an IEP with 14 goals. No. So what supports do you need to make this happen? And then, looking at that way, but counties are going to flip out over that and teachers aren't always going to be honest because they can't be. Right.
Well, because we're scared. We don't know if we say something, how it's going to be turned around. We don't know if our admin have our backs. And in my world, I have been really lucky to have learned from other advocates and know how to stand up for myself. And I'm not scared to be a leader in my team meeting. I'm managing and leading this case or this IEP, but the admin are supposed to have our backs. And when I say I can't do something, they're going to have to back me up. And if admin don't understand our jobs, how are they going to be able to back me up? I've been in many rooms where an admin's like, oh, well, I think we could do that. And I'm looking at them like, no, sir, we cannot.
Right.
I can't, you can.
Yeah, I know. And I have that. I say that all the time about principals. Like, the admin makes or breaks the special ed department. It's their understanding of special education that makes all the difference in the world. Because, like, can they do it? And I have so many times the admins will be like, well, we can't afford to have another person. I'm like, well, that's not the way the law is. I don't care what you can afford. It's what does this child need, and how do we focus on that and get out of that administrator red line, tape, whatever, and let's focus on the child needs, and then we can deal with the rest of it. Because my thing is like, if this is the way the IEP is written and this is the way we need it, I've said in IEP meetings before, like, you don't worry about the rest of it. If this is the way we do, and your county tries to not do it, then I come in, and that's where I come in and do a state complaint or due process complaint or something, because this is the way it needs to be done. It's based on the child's needs. But yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Like, just that it's funny because every so often I come up with like a new pet peeve, and like transitions was one, but like my new one now is present levels. And like the present levels that people write are just they don't tell you anything.
They don't tell you anything. And I switched from self-contained to resource English for a year, just to make sure I had experience and everything. And let me tell you, those IEPs were terrifying.
Yeah.
The ones I inherited, I was so confused. That's a whole other project. I had to make a new template, new systems, figure it all out. But ideally, if it's my first year of teaching, I should be able to go see other people who have done things for years and be able to take it and run with it. And I hadn't been able to do it in the way that worked for my brain and my picky soapbox, needs. And so it's very interesting. Transition is a big soapbox for me as well. No one teaches you how to write those transition plans.
Yeah.
We had some resources in Washington that came out. I can't remember. I think it was Seattle University that was helping develop some things, but it was for resource kids, not for my kids. And I had to piece it together and make my own. And I'm really glad, I'm proud of what I made, but I had to figure it out on my own.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think that we as teachers should have to.
Yeah, you shouldn't. And that's the back end of stuff that parents and, higher ups and everything that don't totally see what teachers do and what we have, we have an 8-hour day or, that 6.5 hours we're with the kids. And then we have an hour and a half for, bathroom and lunch and planning, and like, how are we going to do all that? And, people think, oh, you guys get off work at 3:00. It's so easy. It's like, I don't know any teachers that get off work at 3:00. They might leave the building, but when I taught in Florida, we're sitting on the beach grading papers. You know what I mean? Like, we might be on the beach, but we work nights and weekends because you have to.
It's a requirement because we have too much to do. Now, It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I would find myself always, always, always saying, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way to get all this stuff done. And how can I time block and make it work? And I had to figure out how to time block and coordinate and have those systems in place. And I started being able to leave a lot earlier. But I was known as the person who would be there until 8 p.m. sometimes in my room. I would bring my dinner and get all this stuff done. And I had quiet and music and I had my things, but I didn't want to be that person forever. It wasn't sustainable. So luckily, as I honed in on these systems and whatever worked the best for me, I was able to iron out the kinks and go sit at Starbucks for 4 hours in the summer and knock out a lot of this paperwork and get my free refills. And I would do certain things in the summer so that the rest of the year would be so much easier.
Right. And that's the summers off, right?
The summers off are a lie. It's summer out of the classroom.
Right.
Right.
And not getting paid.
Every district is so different. I was lucky in Washington. They pay really well. I have a lot of, in comparison to other places, I was very lucky, and I got paid throughout the summer. My salary was split for the summer, but
some counties let you do that. It's your choice, 10-month or 12-month.
Yeah, we all had 12 months. So I was lucky to I didn't have a choice. That was not a thing. And I was paid really well. So I was able to kind of figure out, okay, I want to have rest time. I need a reboot. I need a vacation because I never take days off during the school year. If I do, it's to get paperwork done. I'm taking a time off, a sick day for work. I just had to figure out how to get out of that rut, that spiral. And just because it's what everyone else does doesn't mean it's how I want to do it.
Right.
It's not what my kids deserve and it's not what I deserve. And I just have 2 dogs at home. So if I had family, what in the world?
It makes it all different. I think about it. I think about when I taught and I was like, how much extra I did and stuff. But I was young and single, I didn't have a, I didn't have a husband, didn't have a boyfriend. Well, sometimes did, but like that was the thing. I didn't have kids. I had a dog too sometimes, but like, that was the thing. It was like, it was easier. And then as you get older, and have outside life, like how do you find that balance? Which can be so challenging for all of us. So I'm curious on who hires you?
So any K-12 school is right up my alley. They're welcome to hire me. Schools, districts, and then I do eventually hope to have more of a family support center available. And they can hire me at that hourly rate, but I do lean into professional development packages. So I have a webinar series where they get 2-hour sessions with me and they get to pick from a topic of my professional development menu. And they can get a package that's webinar only. They can get a hybrid package where we start off with webinar and then I go in person and do coaching. The in-person classroom coaching is my favorite thing to do because when a teacher says, oh, my kid's too low, I get to be in there and prove to them their kid is not too low, prove to them you can do this, you can do that. And then I have in person as well. So I want to be able to give schools resources they can really access at their budget and their time and their availability. But I want these trainings to not be sit and get. I want to rebrand professional development and education, but especially the PD that we offer our SPED teachers, because it's bananas. It's my biggest pet peeve in life of how we train our teachers, because we actually don't. We don't train them. And then I'm working on some asynchronous trainings. So not every district has time, funding, whatever. So if they're waiting to have enough funding to get me to come in person or have a hybrid series, they'll be able to access an asynchronous training. So I have a paraeducator training coming up this early winter. Well, not early winter. So whatever end of January would be.
Yeah.
Early 2025 is what I should say,
Right.
where they can just pay per participant to attend that asynchronous training and really understand what this job is as a para, or the special education teacher boot camp. How do I do this? It's instructional coaching at their own pace.
Yeah. It's interesting because I hear you saying all this stuff and I'm like, okay, so yeah, where was this when we were teaching, right? When we were in the classroom, because they didn't exist. But I guess, that's kind of like how do principals know about it? Do principals hire you, or is it more like the county level?
Yeah, it depends on where that funding is. And I've learned so much this year just traveling around. Every building has different rules and expectations for how they can spend their money. So principal in Denver, from what I was told, buildings have more autonomy over their funding. So a school principal can hire me. A district can hire me for their staff, so they can bring in all their self-contained teachers. I'm going to Muskogee, Georgia in January, and I'm training all of their elementary self-contained and then all of their secondary self-contained.
Nice.
So you can kind of block it out there that way, so the district can pay for me. But county-wise, whatever that funding, if they have oversight over their schools, not an expert in that kind of world. We have ESDs in Washington where they oversee several different school districts. They could hire me as well. So whoever provides professional development to staff, unions can hire me. I know the WEA in Washington does trainings. If whoever has funding for professional development and want to support their staff and have their staff really empowered, and they want to make their jobs easier by not having litigation, by not having due process, by not having teachers complaining to them, asking, do I have to come to this? Principals are so tired of SPED teachers saying, this doesn't apply to me. So if you want to give your teachers something that applies to them, call me, beat me.
It's so funny that you say that, because there's another special ed attorney and I joke around that we want to do a class of how not to get sued by the parents, simple basic, and it's because, look, I'm an attorney. We sue school systems. That's what we do. But it doesn't benefit anyone to have these due process complaints. You know what I mean? To be hung up in the litigation and all that, and it's taking how long and how many years to go through all this mess. If we all knew and were on the same page and could work together and figure it out, it just seems so much better, more collaborative.
In our world, there is a certain level of things that happen to us that we just accept are a part of the job. Yeah. Student behavior, that's a part of the job. You just have to be prepared to not be prepared. Right. But when it comes to certain things that we're getting with litigation, with due process, with just parents coming in and wanting to have a conversation with the admin, it's taking up a lot of time that you're wasting. You can really eliminate a lot of those little fires you're putting out if you just train everyone properly.
Proactive.
So I offer trainings for administrators who are overseeing special education teachers. I train special education teachers at the resource and the self-contained levels. I train general education teachers to understand how to do this thing. What does inclusion mean? Inclusion's not a bad word. UDL is not a bad word. It's just the implementation of it that can make it feel that way.
Right. I'm trying to think outside of the box of PTAs, or when I taught at I don't know if we ever, I can't remember, but when I taught at the alternative middle in high school, I remember that we were starting a 501c3, for those that you don't know, nonprofit, that was friends of, because the schools were very strict on what we could take as donations and what we could do and what we could do and not do.
Mhm.
And that if we started a Friends of organization, that we could get donations through that and use it however we wanted because we didn't have to follow whatever the school system said. And I'm just thinking along that lines of like setting a school up with that kind of resources to be able to hire you and train the teachers
Mhm.
outside of what the principal's allowed to do and stuff. Um,
Exactly. Just being able to figure out if the community, if it's a need for the community and they want it, there's a lot of different ways to do that. That's how I train special education teachers because we need a lot more than our schools can give us. And
yeah.
teachers just think that they have to buy it, and they don't. I've gotten grants. I've done a lot of crowdfunding and getting resources donated to me. I donate resources to schools, like secondary self-contained rooms right now. And it's this HelloFresh recipe book that I used in my own classroom. And I was training in Minnesota, and a teacher said, "Well, that's really cute, but we can't get that donated. That's too hard." Like no one would donate their used HelloFresh cards. And in
Yeah.
front of them, I texted my apartment community group chat, who I didn't know anybody. I just moved there. And I had asked them, say, "Hey, I work with kids with autism." I joke that you use the A word to get free stuff because no one really knows anything else. But I said, "I'm working with kids with autism. If you have HelloFresh recipe cards, I'd love you to donate them." By the time I got home, I had 300. I flew home 2 days later and had 300 cards donated.
Yeah.
It's just, it takes some brain space, and it's a muscle you have to figure out.
And these days with social media, there are so many people out there that want to help but don't know how to help. And I know like there's the
Mhm.
Buy Nothing groups and stuff. And I've done it on my personal page. I've done it on my business page of like, hey, like I'm a foster parent. And so, there's a lot of times we need stuff. And I'll be like, okay, hey,
Mhm.
I need, I just got a placement of da da da. This is what I need. And it's amazing how the community comes together and does it. But you just have to ask. And I think that's a hard time for the teachers. I know for me, it took me a while to get to that point also of like, it's not necessarily do you need it, not necessarily, but it's giving people the opportunity to feel good, to be able to participate and support you, right?
And it helps shine a light on a world that doesn't get a light shown on it,
Yep,
right? A lot of
exactly.
PTAs don't have special education families in there, so they don't really know what's going on in those rooms, and they only have what they're assuming or what their own personal experience is. So they don't realize how they can help their communities and how they can jump in and support. And I guarantee one of them is going to end up having a family member with a disability,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's the
Yeah,
largest minority group in the world and the only one that any single one of us can be a part of.
yeah,
But it's also the one we don't know anything about as a country, or as a really, it's invisible.
yeah, yeah. It's so true. I love that you said the grants because that was something I did when I was teaching at the elementary school. Is I wrote grants a lot and I got us some good grants and I got other teachers to write grants. I'm like, look, this is like it was something I think it was like $500, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot when you're a classroom teacher. Of like what you could get and like it was
Oh, I've
stuff like
got a list.
right, exactly. And so like there are grants out there that just don't get used and don't get touched because again, teachers, and I don't blame teachers, there's too much out there. There's too much on their plates, but it's kind of like, hey, if there's somebody out there like your professional development teachers that we have in Montgomery County, like maybe they need to look into what the grants are out there and figure it out and see how they can do things.
There's a lot of silos in education, and I've been really marinating on, I mean, for years, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. How can we change? How can we elevate and rebrand education, but especially special education? And I'm looking at what's happening in women's sports, and I'm thinking how that is what we need in the teacher world. We've been joking about what would happen if teachers were treated like NFL athletes,
Yep.
but how can we do what women's sports is doing and find the money?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
My kids are
Exactly.
pretty cool. I think we could do some stuff with these kids. So how can we find the money to really get us what we need, and how can we get the community to tap in and lock in on their schools and their kids and their specific communities, right? And
Yeah.
I don't think it's the teachers' jobs, because I think that's unfair. We have a lot of other things we need to do,
Yep.
but I think it's somebody's job, and it's something that's, I'm passionate about.
And I'm thinking, I mean, not that the PTA could, like because I know a lot of the parents that are on PTAs and stuff, and we're all working full time as well. But it might be something that the PTAs can look into, of like,
Mhm.
hey, what can we do about to support? Because I mean, my understanding of PTA is that's what it's all about, is like helping support and making the school a better place.
I think PTA, but that general community, everyone who owns a business in that community, right? They all get together and they have conversations. Something that's on my bucket list for this spring is to get to know business owners in our area and figure out how we can get all those teachers, because we do spend money.
Right.
If we get the teachers to start going to these places that support education, and if
Yep.
we use their social media, the bar down the
Yep.
street that has 30,000 followers, the influencer down the road that wants this for content that has 4 million followers, how can we all
Yep.
elevate each other? Because
Yep.
ideally, I want this kid to go get a job down the street.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And the sport and build on our community, like, because there are a lot of business out there that want to give to the community, but they don't know how to. And it's like, if we go and say, hey, here's how, a lot of business will be like, oh, great, where do I write a check? They don't have the capacity to do the planning and all that other stuff, but they're perfectly happy writing a check so that their name gets slapped up on something.
Writing a check, donating. Yeah. And my friend is a pharmacist, and she finally got her big girl pharmacy job. And she sends me pictures of her at pharmacy dinners where these drug reps pay for $100 meal and she gets all this nice wine. And there's not a single teacher I've met that has that experience just from their own world. So even if we can create opportunities where we elevate and respect, and we get everybody else to really respect us for who we are and what we do, I think we need to go back and get that momentum families and community members were feeling during COVID, when they had a better understanding of our jobs, you know?
Oh yeah. It opened a lot of eyes for parents of like, oh my God, is this what their teacher deals with all day?
It opened a lot of eyes, and then it got quiet again. People forgot. Yeah. And I think it's because we didn't monopolize on that opportunity. So we have to do better for the people like me. I want to figure out a way that I can do my part, because I love teachers. I am a teacher. I'm going back to teaching. This is my jam, but I also want a better life for us. I want retention over burnout.
Yeah. Which is so needed. And that's the thing. It's like, I always say it, I'm never putting more onto teachers. I never expect it, but like, how can they, with a little easy thing, tap into everybody else to be able to help them make their jobs better?
And
oh my God, I feel like we could talk forever.
Oh, I know. And we have a deadline. We have our jobs to do, but this is my jam. I love talking about this stuff, and it's really important.
It is. And it's like, and it's important, I think, for parents to see it as well, of what the teachers go through and how we struggle, because it's, I still say we, because although I'm not a certified teacher anymore, once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher.
We're in the world.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's not us against them, like the attorneys and the parents against the school system. It's let's focus on the child and what the child needs and how we can make the experience better for all the kids. It's so important, because like they need us, because I feel like our country, and this is a whole nother topic, is like lost the focus of the fact that the children are our future.
Ain't that the truth?
Like, if we don't focus on the children and the education and the not only the intellectual academic side, but the mental health side and all that other stuff, we don't focus on that, what is our future going to look like? Because it's not going to be what we think, because they're not, like education system is not moving with the times,
I think we need to fall in love with learning again as a nation or as a world. We have a lot of resources. If anything, the opportunity is crazy for what we could do. And we haven't figured out how to leverage everything to make it work for us. So if we can figure out how to scrap the No Child Left Behind vibes and maybe fall back in love with the learning of it all, and love each other as a nation, as people in our community, and let the families really appreciate us as teachers, and us as teachers really appreciate the insight and the background that families come. I think every party is a little burnt out, and we just need to have a little reflection time and come back together and figure out what the next couple decades should look like.
Right. And that you brought up the No Child Left Behind, because the problem is the way people are interpreting it is like, oh, that means we can't hold a child back a grade. I'm like, that's not what it's supposed to mean. You know what I mean? Like, it's like looking at it of, yes, I agree. The no child left behind, no child should be left behind, but you also need to meet the child where the child is and let the child progress
Mhm.
at the level the child can progress.
I think the context, it's circling back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? People who
Yeah.
are making choices don't have boots on the ground. And those
Yep.
boots better be in the gifted room and the regular room and the resource room and the self-contained room. I
Yep.
think anybody who's making choices for other people should be subbing in classrooms, visiting classrooms, talking to teachers, talking to parents regularly. And if that's not something that you're hitting, then you're disconnected.
Yeah. Agree. 100%. I love how we circled that around, but it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, no, but it is, because it's like we get these rules. I remember, like, we would get these things and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you're really expecting that? Like, like, they have no concept. They have no concept.
And it shouldn't be a fight.
Right.
It shouldn't be us versus them in any way.
Yeah.
I believe that the politicians have good intentions. I just think we need to all listen to each other and have those different perspectives, so it's just not a myopic view on our kids.
Yeah.
A lot of people tell stories that happen in my classroom, even to other educators, and they're shocked because my room, I deal with a lot of different things than everybody else.
Yep.
You know?
No, I know, because I taught self-contained also. Yeah, I know.
And we don't have conversations about why we're making these choices. So then that can spiral. If we're not talking about it, then we're just assuming things, and that spirals into a whole other narrative that's not doing anyone a service. So
Right. Yeah,
figure that
exactly.
out.
Yeah. No, this has been so awesome. I'm so glad I had you on the show, because it's just such a different like, it's not a different perspective, but it's just a different angle, you know, of like how we can support our schools and as families, how we can. And I'm like, again, not putting it on the special ed families either, you know, the neurodiverse families, but it's kind of like how we can come together as a community to work together to make it better for everyone.
It should be an interdisciplinary, multi-use community, right? And a lot of families, man, they feel like they're on their own path of fighting, and they have a lot of stuff they're trying to do. So it shouldn't be all in one party or another. It's how can we talk to each other better?
Right.
How can we collaborate with each other for every way, or in every group, and really do what's best for all of our kids?
Yeah. And the way that the lawmakers intended the IEP meeting is like, there's a reason we have somebody from each disciplinary, because we all have different opinions and different input and are looking at a different lens. And we don't always monopolize on that.
I was listening to a comedian, and he was talking about, he made a joke, and it's funny. I don't remember who it was the guy that did the spelling jokes on Ellen with his kids. It was a long time ago. I'll find his name and throw it in the comments. But he made a joke about how the IEP system doesn't work. Yeah. And I get it, but the system isn't, because I really like the IEP process. I love an IEP. I've made a personal IEP for my fitness IEP. I made a dating IEP for my friends, because we're all a mess. Awesome. I love the process, right? Right. But it's the implementation of it. Yeah. The problem isn't an IEP. It's we're not telling everyone, we're not training each other on how to be IEP team members, and we're not facilitating our schools. So when a gen ed teacher doesn't want to come, there's no explanation and training where they understand that it's not a choice, dude.
Yeah.
This is not just my job. It's not my kids. These are our kids.
Yeah, exactly. And the gen ed teachers that say, well, I teach music. What difference does it make for me? I don't have to implement it.
Because they don't have the training, right? They don't understand that it's their role.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they can't just say, oh, these kids aren't my kids.
Yeah.
Exactly. Joke's on you. Your kids are my kids too. Because I have a problem with SPED teachers who walk past gen ed kids and don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like scared of them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Man, I'm using all these kids they're getting my stuff done. We're all working together. I have all of these kids in this school are my kids, you know?
That's the way it should be. Yeah, this has been so awesome. So I know for people to get in touch with you, like what's the best way to learn more about you, get in touch with you of like, hey, I want to explore what options?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to olyable.com. It's OLYABLE.com. I'm on Instagram at Life Skills with Laverty. It's my old teacher Instagram. I am starting up a YouTube channel. I think it's under Life Skills with Laverty, but you can find all that information on my website.
Awesome. This has been so great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom with our viewers.
Oh, absolutely. It was great to meet you. And man, I could pick your own brain of all kinds of things. So one day I hope to do that.
Definitely.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.